Hello everyone, Manithroll here, and welcome back to the Suggestion Saturday video. Now today's video is actually going to be a very short video, but it's going to be about a combination of like current skilling combined with the rework that's being mentioned and actually being worked on rather rapidly. So the rework is really good, but there is one issue I'm seeing. And now I know some people will be like, well, I don't like the progress bar. Progress bar is kind of bad. But all along, we kind of already had a progress bar. Now, it might not be in the way that is going to be happening, which I think is actually a very good idea. I mean, the progress bar we're used to this. And I know it's not going to feel as RuneScape-y as it used to with that kind of a progression, but it's actually really going to help the skill because now there should be less of an influx of these items. Now granted, I will say that these items are still not going to be very popular. They're not going to be widely used. Most people probably won't ever use them. Some will because, you know, they don't want to go out and buy the high-end gear, and this will give them a nice way of actually being able to get the gear without having to go and spend millions. So this gear is essentially going to be used probably for most people just for the sake of maybe high alking or disassembly. Which, there's nothing wrong with that, it's just you got to keep in mind with this also comes in the opening of stuff they could do differently with the skill, stuff they can add to the skill. It doesn't have to be, you know, just what it currently is. But now, for the suggestion part of this is, I think this should be done across the board. So there should be this kind of a thing for every single type of gear production, at least gear production. So, like, right now, for instance, I'm fletching, now this is for a daily, but I'm fletching shield bows, which I think are used at level 40, but require a much higher fletch level than that. And I'll actually go into this and look, just to be 100% certain that that is actually the case. So we just want weapons. Okay. Yeah, you could use the U shield bow at 40. I thought that's what it was, but I wanted to be 100% sure. I didn't want to mislead you guys. But then fletching a U shield bow takes in the 60s. Well, a U bow in its variants, it starts in the 65. So by the time you can actually make it, you really don't have a point to use it. And then to even cut the tree, it takes right around, yeah, I was gonna say right around 60 again. So your wood cutting, your fletching have to be higher than what you're actually making. Now, I would say it's actually not quite as bad when it comes to, let's say, fletching, because, well, let's face it, if you're fletching, and let's say you're 100%, you do everything yourself, well, then you're going to be fletching your own arrows, you're going to be, you know, making your own stuff, which might make up the difference of the levels between, you know, this making these items and actually being able to use them. But with this being said, though, it's also very heavy-handed within the crafting skill. You can use Royal Dragonhide, which I believe is level 65 or 62, right around there. But it takes into the 90s of crafting to make the full set. So it's just like, by the time you can actually do that, because crafting is actually a relatively slow skill to actually train. I mean, you can throw a lot of bonus XP, and you can throw a lot of, you know, XP boosts into it. Not just the bonus XP, but like, you know, your Jack of Trades, or you can get those books. You could do it in there. You can do the troll heme thing, and throw your XP into that and make it go faster. But as a general whole, if you're training the skill, it takes longer because it's a lot harder to gain the materials required to actually get a lot of crafting done. With just mining and smithing rework, it's going to be interesting to see how it affects gemstones, because, well, when you mine, you get gemstones. So it's going to be interesting to see that, but it's also going to give a better reason for the gemstone bag. Because now, you'll have an ore bag. As long as they keep it, there'll be an ore bag, and there'll be a gemstone bag. So you can keep throwing them both, and then you can have your sign of the porters there too, sending stuff back to the bank. So you can actually be mining for quite a long time before you actually have to worry about making any type of bank trip. But now my suggestion is just to carry over that progress, which I think they said they already are planning on doing that. It's just going to be a bit of a long process because right now they're focused on mining and smithing rework. So that means these other skills are probably going to get at least a touch of a rework. Maybe not to the full grand scale that the mining and smithing is, but you got to keep in mind the mining and smithing has been lacking more than the actual other ones. Whereas the other ones, it's just more of a rebalancing, bringing stuff down to the actual appropriate levels so people can get and acquire these items. And I personally rather like having the +1, +2, kind of items, like the enhanced versions. The only thing I do think is that these enhanced versions should have a different appearance. And especially the decorated. The decorated one should be able to be used, not only be used, but you could trade it in for the extra XP, but it should be able to be used, but it should look distinguished, it should look better, it should look fancy. I mean, you just put a lot of work into that plate body, or, sword, you should be able to make it look fancy. And that's another thing. Since we're on the aspect of, reworking skills and reworking certain things, why not also rework the end results? So you can actually have something that looks kind of fancy and it's actually player made. So maybe instead of going all the way up to decorated, you could make the whatever the traded version would be, but then you can also make your own decorated version. It'd be like players making their own, player trimmed armor, basically. Not exactly the same, because you don't want to have it exactly the same. But, gemstones, silver, gold, plating on it. Have a little bit more customization to it, too. This way people can actually kind of design their armor plate sets. And not to an over extravagant way, but to the point of where, you can be like, okay, well, I want my plate body to look really expensive, even though it's only a room plate body. I'm using room because it's the best example we know of, because we haven't really seen the other armor sets yet. I mean, we've seen some art concepts, but we actually haven't seen them in game, or any graphical design yet. And not to mention, it could change. So my thing would be, I want to make it look really expensive. I want to get a bunch of Hydrix. I want to get a bunch of those gemstones, and I want to sock those into it instead of just, sapphire and diamonds. I want to put the Hydrix in there. I want to have like 10 Hydrix in it. Maybe it'll have like a certain amount of gemstones you can have on the shoulders, around the neck, the waist. It's hard to say. Now, it should have a predetermined, setup where, you have these different setups, and maybe you can actually even add stuff like, well, for instance, like how this plate body looks. Now, granted, this is a, cosmetic override, but maybe you can actually make stuff that has, spikes on it. Or no spikes. Maybe it looks more sleek. have a little bit more variances. And I think this is a perfect time to do it, or at least add it to it in time, because it's going to make even like more and more stuff more and more valuable, because people are going to see this stuff and they're going to be like, that looks really awesome. I want to be able to do that. I want to make something like that. And it's also going to make these mine and smith items that much more expensive, because there's going to be extra work put into it. So yeah, I mean, that's... See, me personally, when it comes to... when I think about this, I think of like gold-plated bows. Like they have a gold trim along them. Kind of like Ozen's bow, if you get the cosmetic override. It has that like gold plating along it. I think it looks really, really cool. But it's only a cosmetic. So it's not like I can actually go out and make this really awesome looking item. So that part is actually rather disappointing. I don't want to craft these, but why not? So that's today's suggestion, is just to give more of a rework, make sure they try to enforce it, and then also while we're on the aspect of reworking it, make some of these items be a little bit more customizable, so we don't see the same armor sets over and over and over again. And then make these ones that you can actually make actually strong enough to compete with boss monster drops. Now, see, here's the other thing I was actually going to get to also. Depending on the gemstones you add to it, your gear, depends on the power you'll see from it. So if you're using only Hydrix gems, depending on how many sockets are in each piece of gear, if you socket those into that, now you can't unsocket. I would think that would be the fair way to do it. And then you can enchant it. And once you enchant it to the appropriate enchant spell, that gear becomes so much more powerful. So if I'm using, let's say, the highest level, I forget what level 90 smithing gear is going to be, but let's say I get level 90 smithing gear. Now, it's not supposed to be quite as strong as the boss drops. So it's not going to be as strong as the unique drops. But let's say I take these Hydrix, or whatever those ones that you can get from death, the really powerful ones that they degrade. That, I could socket it into that weapon, enchant it, and now it's just as strong, if not more powerful than its variants. So it's just as powerful as the level 90 gear, but like Drygor's might be just as powerful as that, but it's not going to last as long, because that gem is going to lose its charge, that gem is going to lose its power, and then it's going to eventually crumble. Now, you'll still have the sword, you'll still be fighting, you'll still have your gear, but then you have to get another gem, you have to re-socket it. And what this does, this creates a much better way of doing gems, because now gems have more value. Gems are going to skyrocket. Even the sapphires would go up, because you got to figure, not everybody's going to have a constant access to Hydrix, Onyx, Dragonstone, the most powerful ones. They're not going to have constant access to that. So what it's going to do is it's going to actually end up dwindling down the mass surplus that's currently out there, and people are actually going to have to start thinking more logically about their weaponry and their gear. Now, we could say that these armor sets, they could have special effects, but that one I think we can leave for another episode, because that one I didn't really think about that part of it, to be perfectly honest. Not to mention, I'm more thinking about getting these player-made gears on par with boss gear, but not to the point where the boss gear is utterly useless. So that's why I would like to see it that way, where the gemstone builds it up. Now, we all know there's a bunch of different gemstones, so it's like, well, what if you use a sapphire and that level 90 gear? Well, the Sapphire only adds so much strength. So it'll just be a tiny fraction stronger if you use it in level 90 gear. Whereas if you use a level 90 gear piece and you sock it into Hydrix, you know, what the strongest gem there is, I think it's the Hydrix. You know, so let me double check here because I don't want to be wrong. No, it's not up the armor or jewelry. Okay. Yeah, Hydrix. You know, so the Hydrix would be the strongest, so it would add the most damage. So, you know, whatever the equivalence would be to the Hydrix, to, you know, that's how you would figure out the actual weapon stats. You would take, let's say the we'll use Dragors, you'll see, we'll take the Dragor, we'll take the highest tier you can make sword, and then compare them two together. And then the Hydrix will make it equal to the Dragor, and all the other gems in between it will be, you know, slightly less than the other one until there's a perfect balance of equal amount of a boost to it. So, you know, Sapphire will add a little bit, but not nearly as much as an Emerald, you know, Ruby, Diamond, you know, keep going up the list, you know, it'll get stronger and stronger. This adds, you know, another use for gems. So there's so many things that can actually be done with this rework, and I think it's the perfect time to actually add it in. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think, and until next time, later guys.